Security. Remove this useless girl. My stepmother said it into a microphone under warm ballroom lights, in front of nearly 200 people gathered to celebrate my father's retirement. And my father, standing exactly 3 steps away, in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, just stared down at the marble floor. He didn't say a word. I walked out of that room. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked straight, shoulders back, breathing steady, like I was leaving a meeting I no longer had any reason to sit through. And within 47 minutes, I froze every family-funded account, moved $17 million into a trust she didn't even know existed, and turned off my phone. When I turned it back on, there were 56 missed calls. And my whole family was standing at my front door. But they were not they to apologize. They were they because a legal document they had never seen had just collapsed, 20 years of my stepmother's careful planning. Before I go on, if you truly see yourself in this story, please like and subscribe. And drop a comment telling me where you are watching from, and what time it is they right now. My name is Meyer Ellison. I am 34 years old. And this is the night I stopped being invisible in my own family. Now let me take you back 11 months. To the day I received an email from a woman who is already dead. My father is Graham Ellison. If you have ever driven through the northern suburbs outside Chicago and noticed those glass and steel office parks that seem to multiply every year, there is a good chance his name is in the permits. Commercial, real estate, that was his kingdom. 35 years of buying land, building structures, and shaking hands with men who wore which is worth more than most people's cars. He announced his retirement in the spring. The whole town acted like a governor was stepping down. But that kingdom had a foundation most people never saw. My mother Elise Morrow died when I was 11. Ovarian cancer. 8 months from diagnosis to funeral. Fast enough that it felt like someone blew out a candle in the middle of dinner. What I remember most is not the hospital or the silence afterward. I remember the kitchen table. My mother sitting across from me, rolling out brown craft paper, placing drafting pencils in my hand, and teaching me how to draw a floor plan. She would sketch the bones of a building, the load-bearing walls, the joists, the hidden geometry holding everything up, and she would say, "Maya, everything beautiful starts with structure." I didn't know then that she was also an architect. Nobody told me. That detail was buried along with everything else about her. 8 months after the funeral, exactly 8 months, my father married Celeste Ward. I remember the morning he told me, because I was sitting at that same kitchen table, drawing the floor plan of our house from memory. And he sat down across from me and said, "You are going to have a new mother, sweetheart." I was 11. I didn't know how to say, "I do not want a new one." So I said nothing. That was the first time I chose silence to survive. It would not be the last. Let me tell you about Celeste. Celeste Ellison, formerly Celeste Ward, was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and rearrange it without moving a single piece of furniture. She did it with tone, with timing, with the particular talent of making every suggestion sound like kindness, and every command sound like a question. She wore expensive clothes the way other women wore t-shirts, constantly, effortlessly, like the outfits simply appeared in her body each morning. Her hair was always blown out, always honey blend, always the exact same shape year after year, like a signature. I never once saw Celeste look unprepared. That should have been my first warning. Within the first year after the wedding, the Thanksgiving seating chart changed. I went from sitting beside my father to sitting at the smaller table in the sunroom, because you are so much more comfortable away from the crowd. Right, Maya? By year 3, the family Christmas card featured Celeste, my father, and Sienna Ward, Celeste's daughter from her first marriage, born 2 years after me. I was told the photographer ran out of time before my solo shits. By year 5, my bedroom became Celeste's yoga studio. My things were boxed and moved to the guest room. "You will be leaving for college soon anyway," she said. "No point wasting space." Celeste introduced Sienna to people as our daughter. She introduced me as Graham's daughter from before. Before, as if I were a rough draft my father had since revised. I grew up the way you grow up, when you learn to apologize for taking up I became a restoration architect. If you do not know what that is, I do not blame you. Most people do not, including my family, or they pretend not to. I restore old buildings, the winds everyone has forgotten. A brick library in the edge of town with a collapsing roof. A 19th century firehouse with boarded windows. A schoolhouse with a sagging ceiling and chalk dust, still trapped in the cracks like memory. I strip back the decay, find the original bones, and bring them back to life. It is slow work. Dirty work. The kind of work that leaves plaster dust in your hair, and bruises in your knees. I make about $110,000 a year, which is a good living. But in the Ellison world, where Sienna's spinced post for a designer handbag could pay double that, my career was treated like a punchline. Last winter, at the family dinner I was invited to like a courtesy. Sienna announced her latest brand deal, while Celeste beamed like she had signed it herself. When the table turned to me, Celeste tilted her head and said, "Maya, have you found anything more stable yet?" As if I was unemployed. As if restoration architecture was a phase I never grew out of. My father stared at his plate. He always stared at his plate. I drove home that night in my old car 7 years old. Paid off, the box seat filled with measuring tools and work gloves. Sienna's brand new SUV was parked beside it when I left, and she patted my hood in the way in and said, "Cute key. Very you." I did not answer. I just drove. Drove on swillowed, the way I had done for 23 years. But what they did not know was that 6 weeks earlier, the city's Historic Preservation Society had awarded me the highest honor for my library project. I did not tell them. I stopped offering good news to people who only knew how to shrink it. And that project, that library, led me back to my mother's bucks, the one that had followed me like a sealed foundation. No one ever bothered to excavate. 11 months before the retirement party, I was kneeling in the floor of my apartment, opening that old battered books, when I found a thick cream-colored envelope I had never noticed before. In the front, in my mother's handwriting, it said for Maya, "When she is ready." My hands were shaking when I opened it. Inside was a single page and personal letterhead. And when I saw the name printed at the top, my breath stopped. My mother's name. Her firm. Proof that she had been a licensed architect. Proof that an entire part of her life had been erased. And that I had been raised inside that erasure. In that moment I understood something that changed the way I stood in my own skin. It was not that I was weak. It was that I had been living in a house, where the photos were replaced, the names were edited, the story was rewritten, until I forget I ever had a foundation at all. The letter was only 1 page long, but it rearranged the entire architecture of my life. At the top, printed in deep navy ink and heavy stationery, was my mother's name, Elise Morrow Aya, Morrow Architecture and Preservation. Licensed architect. Founder. Owner. No one had ever told me that. Nit my father. Nit Celeste. Nit a single relative in 23 years. Below the letterhead, in her steady, slanted handwriting, were the words that made my hands turn cold. My darling girl, there are things about our family's finances you will need to understand when you are old enough. I have made arrangements to protect what is yours. Mr.
N.
Holbrook has everything. Find him. Tucked behind the page was a business card, Nathaniel Halbrook, S. Trusts and Estates. I sat in the hardwood floor of my apartment for a long time, the radiator humming behind me. The city moving faintly beyond the window, trying to reconcile the woman who had taught me about load-bearing walls with the woman whose entire professional identity had been erased from our house. My mother had never been dramatic. She didn't leave riddles. If she told me to find someone, it meant she had already built something precise and permanent. I opened my laptop and searched his name. Nathaniel Halbrook was 68 years old and still practicing law in downtown Chicago. His office was 12 train stops from mine. I wrote a short email careful on direct. My name is Maya Ellison. My mother was Elise Morrow Ellison. She left me a letter instructing me to contact you. He responded in less than 2 hours. The subject line read, "I have been waiting for this email for 23 years, Miss Ellison." I read that sentence 3 times before it settled into meaning. Waiting. For me. He said he had documents that must be reviewed in person. He asked when I could come. I went the next morning. His office was in the 15th floor of a pre-war stone building in Michigan Avenue, the kind of building that had weight in its bones. The hallway was quiet. The door was solid wood with a brass plate that hadn't been polished into trendiness. Inside, the office looked exactly like the kind of place where people protect legacies. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, a heavy mahogany desk, framed certificates that didn't need to shout. And behind him, in a simple black frame, was a photograph of my mother in a construction site, wearing a hard hat, laughing into sunlight. Alive. Heartbreak stood when I entered, measured and deliberate, his movements economical. "Your mother retained me in 2004, he said once I sat down, shortly after her diagnosis. She was very clear about what she wanted." He placed a leather-bound document in the desk between us. 43 pages. The Ellison Family Trust Agreement. My mother's signature in blue ink in the final page. He spoke in plain language because, he explained, my mother insisted that one day I should not need to decode my own protection. "Your mother entered the marriage with a $17 million inheritance from the Marrow estate. That inheritance was placed into the Ellison Family Trust, but designated as segregated funds. Legally separate. Walled off from marital assets." My pulse was loud in my ears. "Your father was present when the trust was established. He understood the designation." Understood. Heartbreak slid a second document toward me. Trust Amendment, 2006. Signed 6 months before she passed. It designates you, Maya Elise Ellison, as sole beneficiary of the segregated funds effective upon your 30th birthday. No co-trustee approval required. No additional signatures needed. In the margin, in my mother's handwriting, were 3 words, "For my girl." "Does my father know about this?" I asked. Heartbreak paused, the kind of pause that contains the answer before the words arrive. "Your father was fully informed when the trust was drafted. He has always known. The segregated funds were intended for you." "And Celeste?" I asked. "Mrs. Ellison was never provided documentation regarding the segregated structure. She appears to believe the trust assets are entirely shared family capital." Appears. The word carried more weight than accusation. "Over the past several years," Heartbreak continued, "Mrs. Ellison has contacted my office and the fiduciary manager multiple times requesting clarification about beneficiary structures. Those requests were declined. $17 million. For 23 years, that money had sat inside the same trust account that funded charity galas, private memberships, luxury purchases, curated vacations, and Sienna's carefully photographed life. But legally, it was not communal. It was mine. If I withdraw it," I asked slowly, "what happens?" Heartbreak didn't soften it. "The trust currently holds approximately $42 million in combined assets. However, loans have been collateralized against the full trust valuation. If $17 million is removed, the trust will fall below its required coverage ratio. The bank will issue a margin call." The words were neutral. The implication was knit. If I pulled what belonged to me, the illusion would crack. I leaned back in the leather chair and tried to steady my breathing. All those years at the smaller table. All those Christmas cards without my face. All those moments watching my father look down instead of at me. He knew. "I am not signing anything today," I said finally. Heartbreak lifted an eyebrow slightly. "I want to give him a chance." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Your mother would understand." I left the office carrying copies of both documents in a folder that felt heavier than paper should. In the train ride home, I watched the city slide by in steel and brick and concrete. Buildings that had survived decades, because someone built their foundations correctly the first time. My mother had not tried to compete with Celeste. She had built structure. Quietly. Legally. Permanently. And that structure had held for 23 years. When I stepped off the train, my phone buzzed with a new family group message titled Retirement Planning Committee. My name had been added that morning. Nid included. Added. I stayed at the screen and understood something I hadn't fully allowed myself to name before. The retirement party was not just a celebration. It was a stage. And I had just discovered that I owned part of the foundation beneath it. For the next 3 weeks, I carried those documents like a quiet pulse beneath my skin. I didn't tell anyone what I knew. I didn't confront my father. I didn't call Celeste. I simply watched. It is amazing what becomes visible once you understand the structure underneath a room. The new family group message titled Retirement Planning Committee was active at all hours, yet my input was acknowledged only with polite delays. When I asked what time guests were expected to arrive, no one answered for 2 days. When I suggested I might like to say a few words about my father's early projects, the message was met with silence, so complete it felt curated. Then a new thread appeared, slightly renamed, slightly reassembled. My name was not in it. There was no glitch. There is never a glitch with someone like Celeste. Exclusion, when done properly, feels administrative. I decided to test something small. I called the event coordinator at the hotel, where the party would be held, introduced myself, and asked to confirm my RSVP. There was a pause long enough to hear keyboard keys tapping. "I am sorry," the woman said carefully. "I do not see you in the primary list. Would you be attending as a guest of someone else?" The question landed like confirmation, not surprise. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the wall of my apartment, where the morning light filtered through old glass. Then I called Celeste. She answered in the second ring, bright and composed. "Maya, what a surprise. I was not sure you would want to attend, given everything." She let the sentence hang, an unfinished accusation waiting to be filled. I asked her directly why my name was missing. "Oh, that must have been an oversight," she said lightly. "I will have someone add you." And then, almost gently, "Do try not to wear something too utilitarian. It is black tie." That night I opened the trust documents again and read every page. $17 million segregated. Effective, at 30. No car trustee approval required. I was 34. I checked the trust summary included in Halbrook's folder. 42 million total assets. Loans collateralized against the full amount. I understood, leverage. I work with structures for a living. Remove a key support beam and everything shifts. I closed the folder and put it back in my desk drawer. I was not ready to move yet. I wanted to see whether my father would stand in his own. 2 weeks before the party, I drove out to my parents' house with a gift I had restored for him. It was the original architectural rendering of his first commercial property, dated 1989, retrieved from county archives, cleaned, stabilized, and reframed in reclaimed walnut. It was not flashy. It was history. It was the version of him that existed before image management. When he unwrapped it in the living room, his face softened in a way I hadn't seen in years. His fingers hovered just above the glass. For a second, he looked like the man who used to drive me past old stone buildings and tell me what they once were. That is when Celeste appeared in the doorway. "That is thoughtful," she said. "But we already have something special planned for that wall." Sienna commissioned an oil portrait. Something more formal. My father set my gift down carefully in a side table. He did not argue. He did not insist it mattered. He simply let the moment pass. I walked toward the front door. I passed Celeste's study. The door was half open. In her desk was a manila folder labeled Trust Amendment Draft. I didn't step inside. I didn't touch it. But I saw it. And I remembered Halbrook's words. "Mrs. Ellison has contacted my office requesting clarification about beneficiary structures." The week of the party, the rumors began to circulate in ways that were subtle but deliberate. An old family friend called me out of the blue and asked if I was doing all right financially. I asked why she would think otherwise. She hesitated, then admitted Celeste had mentioned I had been struggling, that I was under a great deal of stress, that perhaps I would not attend the retirement celebration, because it might be overwhelming. I hung up and sat very still. Celeste was building a narrative in advance. If I appeared upset, it would confirm instability. If I did not appear, it would confirm distance. If I spoke, it would confirm disruption. It was meticulous social architecture. The night before the party, I laid out my dress in the bed. Midnight blue. Clean lines. Nothing dramatic. I took my mother's pearl earrings from the small velvet box, where I kept them and held them in my palm. Cool. Balanced. I called Halbrook. If I decide to execute the transfer tomorrow night, I asked, how quickly can it be done? Within the hour of authorization, he said calmly. Everything has been prepared since 2006. I thanked him and hung up. Then I slept deeply, the way you sleep when hope gives way to decision. The ballroom at the Lakeshore Grand Hotel glowed in October light when I arrived. Crystal chandeliers, white linen tables, a jazz quartet playing something effortless and expensive, 200 guests moving in clusters, glasses catching gold reflections. At the reception table, the attendant scanned her list twice, before finding my name handwritten at the bottom of a page. Added yesterday. I thanked her and stepped inside. The whispers reached me before the greetings did. Small fragments of conversation trailing UF as I passed. That must be the daughter. I heard she has been distant. Such a shame. Celeste's version of me had arrived ahead of me. I found my father near the stage, standing beside Celeste on Sienna, as a photographer adjusted lighting. He saw me. For a moment, something like relief crossed his face. Then Celeste's hand settled lightly in his arm, and the expression disappeared. Maya, he said, as though greeting an acquaintance. I am glad you could make it. I asked if we could speak privately. He glanced at Celeste. She answered for him. The Hendersons have just arrived. Perhaps later. Later never comes when you keep deferring it. The speeches began. Celeste took the microphone first. She thanked colleagues, celebrated loyalty, praised resilience. She spoke of family as the foundation of success. She didn't say my name. She didn't say my mother's name. When applause rose, I stood from my seat and walked toward the stage, holding the small velvet box containing a restored brass compass. My mother once gave my father, engraved with her initials. I didn't intend to interrupt. I intended to efer it quietly. Celeste saw me approaching. Her expression didn't shift. She leaned toward the microphone and said, clear and steady security. Please remove her. She is causing a disturbance. The room froze. The music stopped mid-note. 2 men in dark suits stepped forward. I looked at my father. 3 steps away. He looked at the floor. He said, nothing. I placed the velvet box gently in a nearby table. I met his eyes once more and said, I came for you. Then I turned and walked out into the October air. Outside, the city felt honest in a way the ballroom didn't. I gave myself 1 minute to feel everything. Then I pulled out my phone and called the fiduciary manager, whose number Holbrook had given me. This is Mia Ellison. I am ready to execute the segregated fund transfer tonight. She confirmed my identity, requested the authorization code from Halbrook, and sent the digital documents for signature. I signed them in the box seat of my car, under the pale blue light of my laptop screen. 45 minutes later, she called back. Transfer complete. $17 million moved into the Meyer Ellison Irrevocable Trust. The first call came 5 minutes after the transfer cleared. I didn't answer. I was already halfway home, the city lights streaking past my windshield. My phone vibrating in the cup holder like something alive and panicked. By the time I reached my apartment, there were 12 missed calls. By the time I changed out of my dress and set my mother's pearls carefully in the vanity, there were 29. When I poured myself a glass of water and stood in the quiet of my kitchen, the number reached 56. 56 calls in less than an hour, from people who had gone weeks without replying to a simple text from me. That is the thing about power. When you have it and do not use it, you are invisible. When you use it, suddenly you exist. I learned later what happened inside the ballroom, when the trust balance shifted, from 42 million to just under 25. Sienna was at the bar, laughing with a cluster of friends, ordering champagne. Her card was declined. She tried another. Declined. The bartender's smile stiffened. She laughed it off at first, the way people do when they assume the world will correct itself quickly. It didn't. Meanwhile, Celeste's phone buzzed with a notification from the fiduciary management firm. Subject line, urgent. Hey and awesome, significant asset movement. Action required. She stepped away from the dance floor, dialing immediately. The fiduciary representative confirmed what she was already seeing. A beneficiary has exercised her legal right to withdraw segregated funds under the original trust agreement. The words were clinical. They were not negotiable. Celeste's composure reportedly dissolved in stages. First the tight smile, then the controlled breathing, then the stillness. She pulled my father aside near the coat check and showed him the trust portal and her phone. The new balance glowed back at them. Segregated fund, withdrawal. Beneficiary Meyer Elise Ellison. My father's face drained of color. Celeste demanded he call me. He did. Again and again. I did not answer. I was running a bath. I was letting hot water steady my pulse. I was giving myself something I had never given before. Time, without explaining. At 11:12 p.m. my intercom buzzed. I looked at the screen. All three of them stood in the stoop of my building. My father still in his tuxedo tie, loosened, shoulders sagging. Celeste in her cream silk gown, mascara streaked down her cheeks. Sienna clutching her phone like it might still save her. For 23 years, I had been the one ringing their doorbell. Now they were at mine. I pressed the intercom and said calmly, "Come up." Celeste began speaking the second she crossed the threshold. "How dare you?" I raised a hand, knit aggressively, just enough. "You are in my home." Lower your voice. Something in the air shifted. My apartment was small but solid. Original hardwood floors. 10-foot ceilings. Built-in shelves. I had restored myself. It was not the ballroom. It was mine. They sat. Celeste remained standing for a moment, before realizing she had no audience to perform for. "You stole from this family," she said. I placed the trust documents in the coffee table between us. I did not rush. $17 million was never family money. It was my mother's inheritance from the Marrow estate. Designated as segregated funds in 2004. Effective to me at age 30. I am 34. I exercised my legal right. My father stayed at the pages. He did not deny their authenticity. Celeste grabbed them, flipping through, searching for an error. That was Nen. Holbrook had built it carefully. My mother had built it carefully. Celeste's voice turned sharp. "You have no idea what you have done. The trust collateralized loans across multiple properties. You have destabilized everything." I met her eyes. "No. I corrected a structure that was falsely relying on assets that were never yours. The loans were authorized under the assumption of full trust valuation. You leveraged against money you did not control. That is not my fault. That is arithmetic." Sienna's voice broke in, small and shaking. My card stopped working. "Yes," I said quietly. When the balance dropped below required coverage ratio, automated compliance systems froze linked accounts. Country club memberships. Supplemental insurance policies. Credit lines. They were tethered to a number that is no longer there. My father finally spoke. "You could have told me." I looked at him and felt something in me. Harden and soften at the same time. "I asked to speak with you alone 3 weeks ago. I was told you were busy. I came to your party tonight, to give you a compass that belonged to my mother. Security escorted me out. When exactly would you have preferred the conversation?" Silence pressed into the room. Celeste tried a different approach. "You are destroying your own family out of spite." "No," I said evenly. I gave my father a chance to choose me publicly. He chose silence. "I am not destroying anything. I am refusing to finance my own erasure." Then I placed Winmar paper in the table. A printed email from Celeste's personal account to her attorney. Mistakenly copied to Halbrook's office months earlier. "We need to move quickly, before Maya finds out about Elise's trust provisions. Graham will not stand up to her." The room went still in a way that felt physical. My father read it twice. His hands trembled. Celeste did not attempt denial. She shifted to justification. "I was protecting this family." "Protecting what, exactly?" I asked. "Your access to funds that were never legally yours." My father stood then slowly. I had never seen him stand up to Celeste. Nit once in 2 decades. Do nit say her name like that, he said when Celeste began to reference my mother again. His voice was unsteady but firm. That moment mattered more than the money. It was small, but it was real. I laid out conditions calmly. The 17 million remains in my trust. The draft amendment transferring beneficiary status is destroyed on notarized void. You retain independent legal counsel, nit shad representation. And if there is to be any relationship between us moving forward, it will nit be managed through Celeste. It will be direct, clear, equal. Celeste left first. The click of her heels down the stairs sounded different that night. Less certain. Sienna bellowed, eyes swollen, silent for once without performance. My father stayed seated in my armchair, long after the door closed. We did not reconcile. Nit that night. But for the first time in 23 years, he looked at me instead of at the floor. By Monday morning, the margin call was official. The bank required capital injection or asset liquidation within 60 days. 2 commercial properties were placed in the market. Independent forensic review if trust withdrawals revealed discretionary spending, categorized as operational expenses, that didn't qualify under fiduciary guidelines. The illusion that everything was stable cracked under documentation. Nit scandal. Nit shouting. Paper. Numbers. Structure. A week later, my father asked me to meet for Kefi. Alone? No. Intermediary? No. Schedule manager? He brought the compass with him. He said he had forgotten which direction he was facing. I didn't tell him it was okay. I told him it was a beginning. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They unfolded the way structural failure usually does in old buildings, not in a dramatic collapse, but in subtle shifts that reveal what was already compromised. Within 72 hours, the bank's formal margin call letter was delivered by courier to my father's office. Bold lettering. Immediate action required. The trust was $13 million below its collateral threshold. 60 days to inject capital or liquidate assets. My father hired independent counsel that same afternoon. Nit, Celeste's attorney. His own. A woman named Patricia Rowan from a firm downtown that specialized in fiduciary compliance. She requested full disclosure of all trust transactions over the past 15 years. What surfaced was not theatrical. It was numerical. Approximately $2.3 million categorized as family operational expenses. That included luxury travel, personal purchases, discretionary transfers, and a down payment in a vacation property titled solely in Celeste's name. None of it disclosed as segregated asset impact. None of it approved under the conditions of the original trust language. Paper does not yell. It does not accuse. It simply records. And what it recorded was a pattern. Celeste was formally notified of potential breach of fiduciary duty. She was offered an option: repay through structured settlement or face civil litigation and removal as co-trustee. The country club membership remained frozen. Credit lines remained suspended. Sienna's social media presence went silent within 48 hours. No explanation. Curated narrative. Just absence. The world that had once revolved around image and optics shrank to conference calls and legal review meetings. A week after the party, my father called me. Nit through Celeste. Nit through a chat assistant. He dialed my number himself. His voice sounded smaller, as if it had traveled through something heavy. Can we meet? He asked. We met at a quiet cafe nit far from the lake, neutral ground, no white tablecloths, no performance lighting. He arrived early. He had aged in 7 days more than he had in 7 years. The tuxedo confidence was gone. He was simply a man sitting at a table, holding a small velvet box. I opened it. Inside was the brass compass I had placed in the ballroom table the night I was escorted out. The hinge had been repaired where it had loosened. The initials engraved in the back, EM, caught the light. Your mother gave this to me when I bought my first property, he said. She told me success meant nothing if I didn't know where I was headed. His voice broke quietly without spectacle. I lost direction somewhere, Maya. I let someone else steer. There are apologies that are rehearsed. And there are apologies that sound like someone discovering their own regret for the first time. I didn't say everything was forgiven. I didn't say the past didn't matter. I said only this. Then you need to choose differently now. He netted. He had asked Celeste to move out temporarily. Nit to divorce. Nit yet. But a separation. He said he needed to understand what his life had become, when he was nit paying attention. We sat in silence for a long moment, two adults sharing coffee once there had been a father and a child sharing blueprints. It was not warmth, it was knit closeness, but it was real. 2 weeks later, Celeste appeared at my apartment alone. No silk gown. No diamond composure. Just a grey coat on a face without careful foundation. She didn't perform outrage this time. You ruined everything I built, she said flatly. It was the most honest sentence she had ever spoken to me. I leaned against the doorway and answered calmly. You built in something that was not yours. My mother's inheritance. My father's silence. My absence. You tried to remove a load-bearing wall, and expected the structure to stand. She did not apologize. I did not expect her to, but she said something unexpected. I was afraid of you. Afraid that one day you would come back and take it. I studied her for a long moment. Fear can rip wood from the inside. It doesn't excuse damage, but it explains decay. I didn't take what was yours, I said. I reclaimed what was mine. There is a difference. She left without another word. 3 months later, I stood in a different stage. Not a hotel ballroom curated for ego, but a restored civic hall where iron railings had been polished, and original plasterwork saved. I had established the Elise Morrow Foundation, funded by a portion of the segregated trust assets. Its mission was simple. Restore endangered historic structures in underfunded communities. The first project was a 1912 community center in a neighborhood once redlined and abandoned. Roof repad. Windows reinforced. Original, tile preserved. It was not glamorous work. It was necessary work. When I stepped to the podium that night, wearing a deep green dress and my mother's pearls, I spoke about buildings people walk past without seeing. Structures labeled condemned because repair takes patience. I spoke about foundations, about how the strongest structures are effin', hidden beneath years of renovation and neglect. I spoke about my mother without lowering my voice. In the front row my father stood when I finished. He stood first. He applauded without looking down. After the event, he handed me a flat package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was the architectural rendering I had restored for him before the retirement party. He had reframed it properly and hung it in his office. I never should have set it aside, he said quietly. I believed him. Not because it erased the past, but because it acknowledged it. Sienna sent me a letter shortly after. Handwritten. No filters. No branding. It was not perfect, but it was sincere. She admitted she had benefited from silence because it was easier. She admitted she had known something was wrong and chose comfort anyway. I have not yet decided what rebuilding looks like with her. Resin. Takes time. Some beams can be reinforced. Some can't. Money didn't make me powerful. Documentation didn't make me brave. What changed everything was understanding that I had the right to stand in my own structure without apologizing for its existence. My mother didn't leave me drama. She left me design. She left me protection built with ink and foresight. And when the moment came, I used it not to destroy, but to realign. If you have ever been told to stay quiet to keep peace, I want you to know something. Peace built in your disappearance is not peace. It is imbalance. And imbalance eventually corrects itself. Long-term fallout does not arrive with headlines. It arrives in paperwork, in quiet mornings, in rooms that feel larger, because someone is no longer standing in them. Over the next 2 months, the Ellison Family Trust was forced into a recalibration that would have seemed impossible just a season earlier. 2 commercial properties were listed for sale. The White Plains office complex went first, below the price Celeste once claimed it was worth. The Stamford Retail Center followed, negotiated quickly to satisfy the bank's compliance demands. My father sat in meetings he once would have delegated. He read documents before signing them. Patricia Rowan required dual authorization protocols and independent, quarterly audits going forward. The illusion of effortless abundance was replaced by the discipline of transparency. Structure replaced theater. Celeste moved into a furnished apartment in Evanston. Knit exile, knit scandal. Just a quiet relocation that spoke louder than announcement ever could. Her legal counsel negotiated repayment terms for the discretionary withdrawals identified in the forensic review. $2.3 million structured over time. The Cartier bracelet she once wore, like punctuation, disappeared from her wrist. The vacation property was placed in the market. She did not call me again. Knit to argue. Knit to apologize. Our conversations had narrowed to nothing, and strangely, that absence felt cleaner than the years of careful hostility. My father and I began meeting once a week. Knit to discuss money, though that topic hovered nearby like weather. We talked about buildings, about the first parcel of land he ever bought, about how my mother argued with contractors who cut corners, about the night he proposed to her with no ring, just a promise scribbled on a napkin. These were fragments I had not known. Memory can function like a hidden archive. You open one drawer and realize entire files were never shown to you. We did not pretend the past was repaired. We simply stopped pretending it had not fractured. The Foundation's first project in Baltimore moved into active restoration. I spent weekends in site, steel-toe boots and cracked tile floors, reviewing structural reinforcement plans with local contractors. We replaced compromised joist, repointed brick, preserved the original oak staircase instead of tearing it out. I thought effin' about how easy demolition would have been. It is always cheaper to start over. It is always faster to flatten what is inconvenient. But restoration is an act of respect. It assumes something worth saving exists beneath damage. Sienna reached out again, not with a public message, but a quiet request. She wanted to visit one of the Foundation sites. She said she didn't understand what I did until everything else stopped. I let her come. She walked through the half-restored community center in burrowed boots, careful knit to step into wet mud. She asked questions that were knit sarcastic. She touched exposed brick like it was fragile. At one point she said, "I didn't know you were building things this important." I answered earnestly, "You did not ask. It was knit cruelty. It was fact." She netted. That day didn't erase history, but it shifted something. Awareness is a kind of scaffolding. Celeste filed for formal separation at the end of that quarter. The petition cited irreconcilable differences. It did not cite margin calls or segregated funds. Publicly it remained private. Privately it was acknowledgement. My father did not contest. He did not fight for the image of stability anymore. Stability, he was learning, does not come from preserving appearances. It comes from correcting imbalance. One evening months after the retirement party, he stood in my apartment kitchen while I made tea. He looked at the bookshelves I had built, at the patched plaster ceiling, at the narrow hallway where the original molding still held. "I never visited here before all of this," he said quietly. "I never saw how you were living." I did not answer immediately. Then I said, "I invited you." He netted. "I know." It was not a dramatic exchange. It was a recognition of distance that had been self-maintained. Recognition is often the beginning of responsibility. Financially, my trust remained intact. I invested a portion conservatively, allocated another portion to the Foundation. I did not expand my lifestyle. I did not move into a larger apartment. I did not buy something that required explanation. The money was not a trophy. It was insulation. It meant I could choose projects based in value rather than survival. It meant no one could threaten my stability by questioning my usefulness. That is a quieter kind of power than spectacle. The following spring, the Baltimore Community Center reopened. Children ran across polished floors where dust once collected. Elderly residents stood beneath restored, tin ceilings and pointed out where they once attended meetings decades earlier. I stood near the back wall and watched the building breathe again. My father attended the reopening. He did not stand in the spotlight. He stood beside me. When someone asked who funded the restoration, he answered simply, "My daughter." There was no hesitation. No. Downward. The long-term fallout reshaped us in ways none of us predicted. The family narrative no longer revolved around curated perfection. It revolved around correction. Around acknowledgement. Around the slow, sometimes uncomfortable work of reinforcing what remains. Celeste built her life around image. I built mine around structure. In the end, only one of those things was designed to hold. There is a difference between winning and standing. I didn't win a war. I didn't defeat an enemy. I stood where I had been shrinking for 23 years, and I didn't move when someone told me to. That is the truer version of what happened. The money was never the point. The margin call was not revenge. The separation was not spectacle. What shifted was something quieter and more permanent, the axis of my own center. People often ask, after everything settles, whether it was worth it. Whether I regret pressing send in the authorization that night. Whether I would undo the fallout if I could. The honest answer is this. Nothing collapsed that was not already unstable. The trust didn't fall because I withdrew $17 million. It fell because it was leveraged against something it didn't legally control. The marriage didn't fracture because I exposed a document. It fractured because it was built in silence and control. My father didn't lose direction because I spoke. He lost direction long before I ever stopped being quiet. All I did was remove the illusion that everything was intact. In the months that followed, I began to understand something about inheritance. We talk about inheritance as if it is always financial, as if it is limited to accounts and deeds and line items in a statement. But what my mother truly left me was not $17 million. It was foresight. It was clarity. It was the refusal to leave her daughter exposed. She didn't confront Celeste publicly. She didn't wage emotional battles. She sat with a lawyer with a pen, and she built protection the same way she built buildings. Carefully. Deliberately. Without applause. That is the kind of love that does not expire. I keep her original letter in a frame in my desk. The words have not changed. For my girl. That phrase holds more weight than any number attached to the trust. Because what she protected was not luxury. She protected my ability to stand without asking permission. She protected my right to occupy space in rooms where my presence made others uncomfortable. She protected my dignity. And dignity once reclaimed does not ask to be negotiated again. My father and I are not perfect now. There are still pauses in conversation where regret lives. There are memories we do not revisit because they are too sharp. But there is also a different rhythm between us. He visits my apartment without invitation management. He reads foundation reports before asking questions. He listens when I speak about load calculations on grant proposals. And sometimes, when he talks about my mother, he says her name without lowering his voice. That alone feels like restoration. As for Celeste, our paths cross rarely. When they do, there is no performance. Just distance. I no longer feel the need to defend myself in her presence. That is the most unexpected outcome of all. When you stop asking someone to see you, their refusal loses its power. She built a life around perception. I built mine around permanence. The difference is visible now. Sienna and I remain in a cautious middle ground. She volunteers occasionally at foundation events. She doesn't photograph it. She doesn't monetize it. That is new. We are knit close. But we are honest. And sometimes honesty is more durable than affection. I do not know what our relationship will look like in 10 years. Restoration is ongoing work. Some cracks can be filled. Others become part of the design. If there is one truth I would leave you with, it is this. Enduring quietly is not the same as being strong. For years I believed strength meant absorbing discomfort without complaint. Sitting at the smaller table, laughing at the comment, driving home in silence, calling it maturity, calling it patience, calling it family. But patience that arises you is not virtue. It is surrender. The moment I understood that I did not have to finance my own erasure was the moment everything changed. If you are listening, and you recognize something in this story, the subtle exclusion, the way your accomplishments are minimized, the way your name is softened or replaced, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not too sensitive. You are not dramatic. You are not selfish for wanting acknowledgement. There is a difference between keeping peace and keeping dignity. Peace asks you to disappear. Dignity asks you to stand. Only one of those can support a life that feels solid. I used to believe that being seen required someone else to look at me. Now I understand that it begins with looking at myself and refusing to step back when I am told to. My mother built something that held. I stepped into it when the moment required it. That is the story. Knit to revenge tale. Knit to triumph over villains. A restoration. If structure. If balance. If voice. If you stayed through all 7 parts, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping your dignity? And which one did you choose? I read every comment,